Welcome into episode 558 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. And today, on Friday morning, is primarily a mailbag episode. So thank you all very much for sending in your questions and your comments. We'll get to those, as much of those as we can throughout the course of this episode. But first and foremost, Bridget and Scott, yesterday, the Bruins took the ice at Warrior. It was a partial, optional, whatever you want to call it, team practice where basically everybody was there and accounted for outside of the Bruins' first, second line, and then Hampus Lindholm and Charlie McAvoy. So the players that were there.
And I think a lot of them were in the building because I saw McAvoy in the weight room. So I think they were just not on the ice, but yeah.
Yeah, correct. But I'm talking about on the ice. And so James Hagens was one of those guys that was on the ice. It was his first ever practice with the Boston Bruins, and he spoke with the media afterwards, as did Marco Sturm and others. So Bridget and Scott, how are you guys doing on this Friday morning?
I think I got injured in the scrum, the Hagens scrum, but
yeah, apparently the scrum was Bridget was not wearing her no contact jersey yesterday.
I'm gonna have to wear one today.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there were so many people, right? I'm sure you saw the pictures. I think Ryan Johnson put a picture up of like what the crowd looked like. That was probably the most people we've had there the whole year. Local news, like obviously all the regulars, but a bunch of cameras, and I feel like I always get hit with a camera. And so like I was standing in the scrum, and I kept getting pushed from behind, and I think I may have re-injured my ACL somehow. So I didn't sleep last night. And my dad listens to this podcast, but so Dad, sorry, this is how you're finding out. But yeah, I'm really like limping. So sometimes Scott and I will like body check each other when we see each other in the hallway. Like, don't do that today because I'll just fall down.
I mean, you shouldn't have told me that. So Bridget's kind of like the Matt Patra of these media scrums, where like I think she's too small, and I think she just takes too many hard hits. Like I don't know what it is. Like she can't get out of the way of them. You know, everyone else, I feel like you figure out how to kind of establish an inside position, protect yourself, not take a hard hit. And Bridget, every time, it's just like, oh, that was violent. Whoa,
yeah, it was like cheap shots. A lot of cheap shots going on in there. And you want to know what the problem is? That maybe I actually wish I was a little bit shorter, because I'm like the perfect height where they like the taller camera guys think they can just like put a camera on my head. Like it's like the perfect height for a tripod. And so I'm just catching like corners of the bottom of cameras all the time. And sometimes they're just like straight up like, hey, can I put this on your head? And I'm like, no, of course not. Like, you're crazy. But yeah, no, my ACL not doing good, guys. Thank you for asking, Brian. I know this is not what you were hoping I said. I didn't sleep, so.
You poor kid.
I'm doing much better.
Yeah, Scott didn't get a season-ending injury over here, so.
He's I reverse hit the cameraman. You got to establish position.
I should get my elbows out at least. But yeah.
All right, well, let's get to some of the conversation that were in those scrums. Unfortunately, Bridget was kind of, banged up a bit there, but I guess I'll just go quickly. I'll say what I was going to say, which was a comment Marco Sturm made in his scrum. I'll keep it simple. This is a partial quote from Ty Anderson. On Twitter, he says, I would love to see him, meaning Hagens, as a center, because he has that speed and ability to move pucks, but definitely not this year. And I just found that interesting because Marco Sturm had similar comments around Pavel Zacha earlier this year when Zacha started the year at wing, and Sturm said that he theoretically liked Zacha at center. So when Sturm says these things, I think it carries weight. And I found it interesting because the part about Hagens being a center at the NHL level, or at least being used as one, I think always kind of felt more likely than not based on his player profile and his prospect profile. But you just never know with players if they're even going to get that opportunity, if people see them more as a winger at the NHL level. So the fact that Sturm likes him as a center, has vocalized that, tells me that long term they still hope that he is a center iceman for Boston, despite a bit of a logjam with Elias Lindholm and Pavel Zacha and Fraser Minton and others. So I just found it interesting, and that was my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, I was the one who asked him that question because I was really because as you said, like he has been pretty open about that in the past about like I view this guy as a wing or I view this guy as a center. So I was really interested like where he stood as of now. Um and yeah, he at first it seemed like he was gonna be reluctant to even say he's like a wing this year, but he did say like, yeah, he's a wing for now. It wouldn't be fair to put him at center. Just because it's so much to put on a 19-year-old kid in terms of the defensive responsibilities that go along with being a center. Um, but I did like hearing that, longer term, looking forward, he wants to see him at center at some point and thinks he can do it. For like you said, like he cited his skating, his puck moving through the middle of the ice. So that's I think that's good news if you're the Bruins or if you're a Bruins fan, because that is right. Like you still don't know who the long term number one center of the future is, and maybe it's not Hagens, right? Like maybe he tries him at center and says, you know what? Actually, I like him better on the wing, or maybe Hagens tops out as just a really good number two center. But the fact that like that's on the table somewhere down the road in Sturm's mind is pretty encouraging.
Yeah, and he said that about Zacha. He said that about Poitras too, right? We haven't seen Poitras play wing pretty much at all in Providence this year because Sturm said no center. So yeah, he's been pretty straightforward with that and how he sees those players. My opening shift I'll just try to do it quickly, and we'll get more into this after, but it was about the timing of the call up, right? For weeks we're like, is it going to be now? Like we're looking for different windows and when it felt right for a call up. This was one of the natural ones because you could get 2 practices in, and we thought even maybe 3, but they canceled the Wednesday practice this week. But so the timing was asked about, obviously, and Sturm did mention it had to do with we had a window. So we had a window. He looked like he was ready for development at the NHL level. But he was also asked about, did this have anything to do with the inconsistency of the players on the left wing of that third line? And I just want to read you the quote. You can take it or you can leave it. He said, nothing. The road trip we had nothing to do with it. Absolutely nothing. We want to do the right thing for that kid and for the organization. I was lucky enough to be a part of this in LA with college kids coming up and junior kids coming up. They need time. And that's why I love that when he went down there, he got a feel for that a little bit and got some experience playing against men. And this is just another step in his development. But like he's trying to say, like, absolutely not. This has nothing to do with the players that were currently on the roster struggling at all.
Yeah, I mean, he can say that. I don't know that I totally buy it. Like, I think the fact that he's had a revolving door at third line left wing is at least one of the reasons James Hagens is now here. But I do think he's telling the truth about like wanting to do right by Hagens, in the sense that like if they didn't think Hagens was ready for this, he probably wouldn't be here. If he was really struggling in Providence and it was like, oh, you know what, he clearly needs time down there, like I think they would just leave him there for the rest of the season. But he's here because A, they think there's at least a decent chance he can handle it, and B, because they have a need. Like that is part of it. So
and C, because they're 99% sure they're making the playoffs. So that too.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with Scott on this. I think there's a little bit of a diplomatic answer there, but yeah, I think it's hard to look at their struggles at third line left wing specifically and think to oneself, if somebody had grabbed that position, undoubtedly, then I don't know. I just think it's too obvious. Obviously, if James wasn't playing well enough in Providence, then you're not going to get called up. But even if he was, but the Bruins roster was just killing it right now. I don't know. I guess we could take Sturm at his word. I just think that it may have been a bit of a diplomatic answer, but either way, to me, it doesn't really matter because he's here and it is what it is. So I'm just glad that he's here.
My opening shift is because I don't know if we're gonna touch on it at any other point, but is the clinching scenario. So the Bruins did not get quite enough help Thursday night. Columbus did lose in regulation, so they can no longer pass the Bruins. But Detroit and the Islanders both won, so they, in theory, could still catch and pass the Bruins. The Bruins now could clinch a playoff spot with a win of any kind against Tampa on Saturday, or if they lose them, they're going to continue to either need help or take care of business Sunday. But simplest form, if they beat Tampa Saturday afternoon, they are officially into the playoffs and clinch a spot. The other big game, well, a couple big games Thursday night, but Montreal beat Tampa. I don't know if people watched, but that was a great game with a bajillion penalties and fights. Tampa tied it late, and then Montreal scored the winner even later. So they end up taking that in regulation. So if you're dreaming of a Bruins Canadiens first round series, as I am, that is still in play because it's now Buffalo at the top of the division, but Montreal right there with them. And then I think it's 2 points down to Tampa. So it's still a possibility. And then lastly, I'll just throw it in here too, but Will Zeller's season came to an end with North Dakota. They lost to Wisconsin 2-1 in the Frozen Four. Denver beat Michigan in double overtime in the other Frozen Four game, but Zellers finishes a really good freshman year. 18 goals, 14 assists 18 goals, 16 assists for 34 points in 38 games. He was the second leading goal scorer for North Dakota as a freshman, fourth on the team in points. Fully expect him to be back in North Dakota as a sophomore. So encouraging steps there. He did not have a point in Thursday's loss, but he did have 2 points in each of their first two NCAA tournament games.
Let's also add to the timing of Hagens' call-up that he wasn't playing in the Frozen Four, right? Like, he could have still been playing hockey up till this weekend, and the championship game still hasn't been played yet. So, like, obviously him and BC season ending early when it did gave him time to get acclimated in Providence, gave him that extra time. Would have been a really hard decision if his season ended, say, in the Frozen Four like Zellers did yesterday. Then what do? You have 3 games left. You don't have a lot of time to really work on, a ramp up situation, which it feels like based on the comments, like the ramp up was really what they wanted for him to get, like Sturm said, like acclimated to playing against men. And so anyway, we can, I guess, transition back to some of the other takeaways from the Sturm press conference and what Hagen said yesterday, or just general thoughts on the whole situation. Brian, did you want to get back to your thoughts? Because I know you weren't there, but you were following along with all the.
Well, can I hit an obvious one off the top? Is Sturm did not fully commit to him playing Saturday. Left that a bit open ended. Said, because Thursday is just an optional. Want to get him into a full practice Friday and then make a decision. I will just say I would be very surprised if Hagens isn't playing on Saturday. I really don't get like calling him up and then not playing him. I think he's here to play. So I imagine he's in, but Sturm did leave open the possibility of that not happening. And then obviously to Bridget's point earlier, also did not commit to like where he'll be in the lineup. We think it's going to be third line, but who are his line mates? Is it Minton and Husnudinov because that was the third line in their most recent game? Or is there another shakeup because maybe Sturm has some specific combination in mind that he wants to try?
You guys, I tried to ask. I really did. Like for the listeners, I tried to ask him where he was going to put him. Like, do you have any preliminary idea? Like, would you like to see him with the young kids? Like, would you like to see him sheltered a little bit more with some of the veteran guys? And he said, I like your effort, but I'm not telling you. So I'll be asking it again today, though. So I mean, we'll see it with our own two eyes where he's slotted in this practice. Gonna go back today, obviously, and see that. Which we didn't get a chance to see yesterday. He kind of was just saying like, "Oh, this is Hagens' day. We're just gonna let him enjoy it. We're not gonna like talk about the game yet at all. We're just gonna let him like have fun out there and and just enjoy. I think he even said like something about his bank account. Like his bank account got bigger yesterday, but yeah.
Sturm was smirking through your whole question as you're asking
it.
He
was.
So like I'm sitting next to Bridget. I'm like, get her, Marco, get her.
Yeah, he was like ready to be like, girl, I'm not telling you that. But I also asked him about the conversations up and down, like him, Ryan Marchand, the Providence head coach, Don Sweeney, like how did that go? Was it ultimately his call? And I'll read that quote too, actually, because I think it's worth talking about. And I know that was like one of the main questions I wanted to ask going into it. So let me find it. Sorry, guys. So he said, as a group, I think we felt like this is a good thing to do for him, for his development. And again, I don't look at the small picture. I look at the big picture, right? This kid will be, I think, a Boston Bruin for a while. He will be a big part of our team moving forward. So whenever I feel like it's the right time to do it, I will do that. And whatever I feel like it's the right thing to do for the team who has been battling really hard all year long, I will do that. So again, it's about us. It's always about us as a team, not as an individual. So he did acknowledge, like, it was a lot of the decision did fall to Sturm, I think. And obviously, every single person has talked about the communication between those three that I mentioned being pretty constant. They're always in touch with each other about this stuff. Sweeney's been at a lot of the Providence Bruins games, as well as some of the other staff for the Bruins, management. And then Ryan Marchand is obviously involved in this conversation, saying, how much progress he's made and what he looks like down there. So I do think ultimately Sturm had the final call because it's his roster that he's managing. And he kind of alluded to that there.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, I had some comments to me yesterday based on Sturm's comments about if he's even going to play for the Bruins this year. And it's like, okay, I know Marco told the media that he's not going to commit to if he's playing on Saturday or not. Okay, great. Wonderful diplomatic answer there. I would be absolutely floored if he's not in the lineup on Saturday. And I can promise you he's going to be in the line. If he's not in the lineup on Saturday, he's going to be in the lineup at some point here with the final games, because you don't call up a player, burn his entry-level contracts first year, and then stick him on the ninth floor. At that point, then clearly he should be down in Providence playing AHL playoff games. Yeah. Because why would you want him sitting around doing nothing? So there's still a very, very small, very petite filet faction of fans that I just feel like might be a little bit, I don't know if they're bitter about they were saying he wouldn't be called up and then he was, and now they're trying to cling to the fact that, Marco said he might not play Saturday. Come on, he's playing. If it's not Saturday, it's shortly thereafter. You don't burn an ELC first year to not play somebody.
My thought is that, because I was having this conversation with someone at the Woo Sox yesterday, because I worked 2 jobs yesterday on whatever I did to my ACL.
On a bad knee.
Playing through the injury. But no, what I was saying was...
Bridget, if there was a podcast Masterton Trophy, you'd be our nominee.
Thank you. Yeah. That recovering from ACL surgery and then coming back and having the season that I had. Hopefully it's not over. But so I was talking.
I think there's supposed to be like an element of humility though, and I feel like you're lacking that right now. So
I'm just being honest, everybody saw it, right? I thought it was just well known at this point, but so when I was talking to them, I basically was saying like, okay, you can say he might not play Saturday, but like this practice that we're about to go to, like it may be fairly obvious, like he is ready, and like he still has a chance a little bit to force a hand, so to speak, just by having a good practice. And I know it doesn't speak as much as a game situation, but like if he's working really well with the line that he's on in practice, and he's scoring on drills and stuff, like it could easily be an obvious thing. It's like, oh yeah, we're gonna put him in. Like even if you were still on the fence about it, which I feel like maybe there's like a 90-10% split, like 90% he's going to play. I don't really even know what he'd have to do in practice to not get into the lineup. But yeah, like at some point, I think he'll make it obvious that it's him that belongs there. So.
Yeah, like I said, if it's not tomorrow, it's going to be one of these. You didn't call him up to not play him. He's gonna get an opportunity to play. What he does with that opportunity, it remains to be seen. But there's no world where you burn the first year of his entry-level contracts and not give him an opportunity to play, especially at the expense of foregoing any development that he could have had in Providence. The whole point about bringing him to the NHL is to continue that development at the next level, not stifle him on the ninth floor. So it makes in these 3-on-2 drills in practice today, I'm sure he'll look great against Andrew Peeke enough to keep in the lineup on Saturday. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think really what he's doing in practice is going to be much of a determination. I think their minds are probably made up. It might determine who they want him to play with, and that to me is something that's interesting. And by the time people listen to this podcast, I'm sure that line rushes for practice will have been documented online and such. So we're probably better off to not spend too much time on that. But I am curious about if it's going to be a new version of the kid line. I am curious if it's going to be with an Elias Lindholm for maybe some entry-level security of a reliable line mate. Bridge, I think you mentioned that an episode ago. Does he play with a Tanner Jeannot like they had with Fraser Minton earlier this year to put some muscle next to him? I honestly could. And by the way, that fourth line hasn't been very productive as of late. So
they also did that with Patra when he was up.
Yeah, exactly.
Had him with Jeannot and Kastelik.
Yes, exactly. Good point. So I'm actually really curious. It can go a variety of ways, but we'll find out in short order. I don't know if you guys have any further thoughts on those lines.
My final thought on it is just, I wish they would just decisively say, like, yeah, he's playing Saturday. We brought him up to play. He's playing Saturday. Like other teams have done that with some of these kids who have turned pro late in the season where there's no open-endedness. It's like, yeah, he's here and he's playing. And I know like every situation's different. I've even preached that as much as anyone. But it just like with this team, it always feels like pulling teeth just to like, it's like, oh, we can't hand the kid anything. And it's like, you called him up. He's playing. We know he's playing. You didn't call him up to sit in the ninth floor. Like you don't have to hide it, I guess. I don't know. It's not a big deal. It's just kind of like frustrating.
Yeah, it is.
Well, certainly as a media member and journalist, it takes away a headline, right? Definitely.
And like I said, they'll just like what Scott said, he'll just smirk at you through the whole time knowing he's not going to answer your question.
Listen. That's the type of question that going into it, Marco Sturm is going to know you to death. No.
Well, like there are other ways to answer. Like there's like, oh, we have a lot of options, right? Like that's a different answer, right? Like, oh, we have options. I think that there's good places for him to fit in. We just haven't figured it out yet. Would have been like another way to answer that. But was not how that went. So
well, the beauty of it is you can only hold your cards tight to your chest for so long. We will find out today. We'll find out in a matter of hours what his initial look is, unless they just do 40 minutes of power play and special teams and break. Like maybe they don't do any. It's possible they don't do line rushes today, I guess, but I would be surprised if we don't see something.
That would really be gamesmanship for literally no reason.
Yeah, they've been off a few days at this point. I'm sure they'll do something.
Yeah. Also, guys, don't you think like playing Saturday against Tampa Bay is a good way to get him a taste of what the playoffs might be like.
Yeah. I mean, hop right into the fire.
Yeah.
Right? I think so.
It's a team
Absolutely.
that you have to worry about. Like Scott said, like they've been in a lot of fights. It's a very physical team. They're playing with a lot of fire. So
and they also have something to play for, because now if the season ended today, they're the 3rd seed in the Atlantic and they're starting on the road. And like they don't want to do that. They still want to get home ice.
Well, and quickly, just you were mentioning the clinching possibilities earlier, Scott. As we currently speak, yes, the Bruins are any type of win away from officially clinching. But with 4 games to go, I could honestly tell you I have zero idea who the Bruins are going to play in the first round for many reasons. First and foremost, the Atlantic, the top 3, is a game of leapfrog. So it could A1 could be Montreal, it could be Buffalo, it could still be Tampa. The Bruins are only 2 points clear of Ottawa in the wild card, right? So Boston's wild card 1, but maybe they end up being wild card 2 and they play Ottawa. Who does wild card 2 end up playing? Which division leader, Atlantic or Metro, right? So if the Bruins finish wild card, and by the way, which division leader finishes with the most points, right? Like there's so much that is undetermined right now. The only thing we really know for sure is that Carolina has clinched the Metro, so they are going to be M1. We know that, but which wild card are the Bruins? Which wild card? Which division winner is truly ends up being the top seed? So it's fascinating. It's tough to gear up for, but it makes for an interesting 4 games here down the stretch. And yeah, the last time Tampa Bay played on the road in Buffalo, or maybe it was 2 times ago. Actually, I think they played on. Tampa's played in Buffalo, I think, twice recently, but there was 1 game recently in Buffalo where it was a fight fest.
Oh yeah,
Scott mentioned last night in Montreal was a fight fest. So there's something about Tampa Bay on the road against these Atlantic teams down the stretch. They're trying to flex their muscle a little bit, but
well,
should definitely make a good game Saturday.
Think back to the outdoor game. That was a really physical game. That was, I mean, it was a high scoring game. A lot going on. Goalie fight. Okay, let's not forget that was the game that Swayman fought. So, I mean, that's how it goes playing Tampa this year. And I guess that's been what they do for many years. But
maybe Tampa punched themselves out Thursday night in Montreal. Might get them a little tired Saturday afternoon.
You know, one last interesting thought looking at the standings before we get into the mailbag is I'm looking at Detroit and Columbus, and I can't help but notice that they're in a bit of a tough way right now in terms of being able to make the playoffs. I mean, it's still possible, but it's difficult. And with both of those teams respectively, I think back to their games against the Bruins on home ice and how damaging I think those losses to Boston were. I mean, both teams had a 3rd period lead on Boston on home ice. And in Detroit, the Bruins found a way to come back and get that win. But in Columbus, it was a 3-0 lead with like 14 minutes to go. And so if I were those fan bases and they don't make the playoffs, I would say, okay, which game down the stretch was probably where we ended up losing it? I would probably look at those 2 games against Boston, because after that game against Boston, Detroit, they went on a slide. Had they won that game, maybe they don't. And then Columbus, I think, had lost 2 games in a row heading into that game against Boston in regulation. And then that was a huge loss for them after having a 3-0 lead. Now it's 3 losses in a row, and then they went on a bit of a slide. So the Bruins, who weren't a great road team all year, had 2 key wins on the road that kind of helped propel them. And anyway, just an interesting thought looking at the standings.
Yeah, and I did want to say that 3 games left. This is what it looks like, just so people know. Saturday, 12:30. So, have brunch and watch the Bruins against Tampa. And that's an ABC game, too, if you're looking for it. And then Sunday, they have a back-to-back, 6 p.m. against Columbus, who Brian just talked about. And then they finish off on Tuesday against the New Jersey Devils at 7 on NESN. So that's what they have left. Obviously, Tampa is the playoff team. Columbus was fighting, for a bubble spot. And then New Jersey's been out for a little bit. So 3 different kinds of teams in different places. And we'll see. I want to see Hagens in all 3 of them.
Okay, Scott, do you have any final thoughts before the mailbag?
No, let's mailbag.
All right, Bridget, are you good?
Yeah.
I'll read off the first one. Okay, this question came in from Ben. Again, thank you to all of you for submitting your questions and your comments. So we'll try to get to as many as we can. So we'll start off with Ben. Ben says, everyone seems to think Hagens is going to save the third line now that he'll likely be lining up at left wing. What if he's not the answer? What if he barely makes a difference or can't handle the physicality? Then what? You're still heading into the playoffs without a solution for third line, and the Bruins are basically out of options. In that scenario, could you see them sending Hagens up to watch from the ninth floor and bringing up Matt Patra? If Lindholm and Geekie move back to the third line, do you move Lindholm to the wing and have him take some draws to make that happen? So I'm just going to sidebar for a second. So I do like here how Ben's acknowledging that Matt is not somebody that can really play the wing at the NHL level. He's looking for a solution to keep him at center at the NHL level. Geekie has had success with Patra before, so might be worth a shot if Hagens doesn't pan out. So Bridget and Scott, if James does not show that he's the solution right now, at least somewhere in the top 9, and he's not one of the best 9 forwards, then what?
I don't see it being Patra. I kind of think the window has passed on that unless there's an injury to a center. Marco Sturm said again yesterday that he's happy with his centers, so I don't think you're moving Elias Lindholm to the wing or any of the other centers to the wing. I think if it doesn't work with Hagens, you're going back to the guys that have been here. And by the way, because we talk about a revolving door, but guys who have also had good stretches, like Mikey Eyssimont has played well for you at times this season. Even going back to right before the Olympic break on that Florida trip, he was good in those games. Alex Steves, it's been a while since we've really seen him play well, but he did make an impact earlier in the year. Lucas Reichel was just playing well for, a solid 2-week stretch before he started to peter out a little. No, I think the outcome there is you hope that these guys see Hagens come in, are practicing hard, are just chomping at the bit to get back in if and when that happens, and that whoever nudges ahead takes advantage of the opportunity. That's how that goes. I don't think it's going to be anything as dramatic as another call up and moving a center to a wing. Like it's probably too late to do that.
Yeah, I mean, there's already 3 guys sitting on the 9th floor that can play that position once Hagens is in, like Reichel, Steves, Eyssimont. Those guys are probably all better than the options that you have in a call-up situation. So though they've been inconsistent, like they've been NHLers for, this season. And so more so than Patra has. And you did feel like they had a little bit with Reichel there. Like, I feel like he would be the first one that they go back to. If that case happens that Hagens needs a day off, like, because either he's not playing well or for whatever reason, he's not in the lineup on a given night. I think I'm so optimistic, maybe too optimistic, but that this does not become a problem in the first place.
Yeah, I think I'm with you guys. I think if Hagens doesn't work out, I think the options are what they already have at the NHL level. And if it's not good enough this year, then it's not good enough this year. I don't think anybody thinks the Bruins will be going on a super deep run, but you never know. Sports can be crazy. But the reality with this Bruins team is that they don't have, one of the best rosters in the Eastern Conference. So if it's not good enough, it's not good enough. But if James doesn't pan out right away. This question is from Remy. Remy says, hey guys, with the signing of Hagens, I'm wondering if you have any lineups that may be more unique than just placing him on a line with Lindholm and Geekie. What I've noticed is ever since Minton left the third line with Jeannot and Kastelik, the 2 of them have dropped in production. Love Sean Corrali, but is it time to add a bit of skill between the 2 of them? No, I'm not referring to Hagens. But what if, and here are some line suggestions, Geekie, Minton, Pasternak, Middlestat, Zacha, Arvidsson, Hagens, Lindholm, Eyssimont, Jeannot, Husnudinov, Kastelik. I know you guys hate this because it drops Kuzi to the fourth line, but it's for the greater good. He could get these guys the puck more, and I bet that line would start popping the odd goal again. Now, for the record, Remy, as much as we have an affinity for Husnudinov, we do recognize his versatility and the ability to play up and down the lineup. So I appreciate the creativity with these line suggestions. And you know what's interesting, Bridget and Scott, about Remy's lines here is the lines I just read off. To me, those are the types of lines that you could see Marco Sturm go with in practice on a day like today that has everybody being like, huh, those are interesting. Didn't expect those. You know, like something a little bit funky that kind of changes a little bit of everything outside that second line. And like I could see Mikey Eyssimont, Hagens, and Lindholm as a line, and we're all just like, oh, didn't expect that, but that's classic Marco Sturm, you know, giving us what we don't expect. But anyway, yeah, what do you guys think about that question?
Yeah, so my one concern would just be that Husnudinov hasn't played center in a while, and fourth line center is also a little. It's a different ask than centering Pasternak and Geeky, which is where he was earlier in the year. Like it's a much more defensive job. So I'd have some concerns there. But what you could do instead is maybe just put Kastelik at center and keep Husnudinov as a wing in this scenario. Kastelik is a natural center and obviously still takes a lot of faceoffs. So I'm not totally opposed to this, but I would be surprised if it happens. For one, and people might scoff at this, but I promise you, like, it matters to players. Sean Kuraly has played every game this season. He is on the verge of a second straight year in which he plays all 82. I'm going to guess that's pretty important to him, and I would guess that Marco Sturm recognizes that. There's only 3 players on this team who have played every game so far. Can you guys, without looking, can you guess the other 2?
Zadorov?
Nope.
No, I think he missed. I feel like Zadorov missed one.
Yeah.
Minton, Geeky.
Yep. Fraser Minton is 1, not Geeky.
Middlestat? No, he's never mind. He got scratched. Not Arvidsson.
Kastelik.
Yep, Kastelik.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
Kuraly, Minton, and Kastelik.
Yeah, I mean, Kuraly's an interesting player because he's very clearly a very relied upon player in that room from a leadership perspective. When you see him at practice, you see exactly that. He's only 33 years old, but I want to say Kuraly is the oldest player on the Bruins. He's a very young version of, you know, like a Nick Foligno role for this Bruins team or something like that. And I think that's a very valued member of the room. But at the same time, I think a lot of Bruins fans are correct in kind of looking at his game and saying, he's okay. Like he's not hurting every night, but he's not really, maybe he's doing the little things, but he also kind of, could he be replaced in the lineup with somebody else? And I think it's fair to ask that question because, you know, if you're not fearing for your job, then, you know, you're not going to get the best out of somebody. So I just think that from an intangibles perspective, and Scott, you kind of bring it up a little bit with the games played type stuff. I just feel like Sean's going to have to do something really egregious to probably not be in that lineup. I just think they rely on him too much for penalty killing. I think they rely on him too much for being that leader. And it's interesting I say leader because I don't even know. You know what's interesting? Was it Charlie McAvoy on? Yes, I think Charlie McAvoy was on Spit and Chicklets a week or 2 ago, and he mentioned that the Bruins, himself and David Pastrnak, they identified him, Pastrnak, and Hampus Lindholm. They identified like a specific group of like 4 or 5 leaders on the team. And then he did go on to say that like other guys can do their own leadership in their own ways, but they did decide on a specific group of 4 or 5 guys. I wonder if Sean's one of those guys. I bet he would be. I wouldn't be surprised if he wasn't, or if he was.
So I think the smaller, like if we're just talking 5, I think the smaller group is McAvoy, Pasternak, both Lindholms and Zadorov. But then I do think Corrali and Jeannot in particular are pretty important leaders, like after that core group.
Yeah. And
I would also say Pavel Zacha too. Like he's probably in that very next tier.
Yeah, like quietly, but definitely. So my thought on just the Corrali part of it is that he has a role to like a specific role on the penalty kill, and he's good at that, right? So obviously, line hasn't been scoring, but those guys are all guys that you can use. Like they all have their own roles outside of just playing on the fourth line. Like Kastelik and Corrali are very good on the penalty kill. Kastelik with the face-offs, like Jeannot being the physical guy that will stand up for his teammates. Like they all have their own roles that are separate from and just playing together on that line. I will say I do not think the optimal place to start James Hagens is with Elias Lindholm and Mikey Eyssimont. I think I want to see him with at least one other person on his line that can create and has that same level of hockey IQ. So I would think that he would be best with, Minton or Kuznetsov or, there's got to be a geeky, like there's got to be one of those guys on his line, I think, just because you want guys to think the game the same way. And Eyssimont hasn't really played that much recently. So, but if we were going to get creative, I think that Jeannot on a line with Hagens is more, like that's more likely just because of the whole, like, we're going to have someone as a protector out there. I actually got a video of Zadorov yesterday telling Hagens a joke of some sort, and they were laughing together. And I was like, I wonder what Zadorov said to him. And someone commented that he was probably saying, I'm not going to let anybody touch you or something like that. Cause he definitely was making him laugh. So
can I got to bring something up here. Cause I'm really interested how you guys feel about this. It never crossed my mind. Someone tweeted it at me and I've kind of been uncomfortable with it and like, just don't know what to make of it. Someone said Hagens kind of looks like a young Zadorov in terms of their facial features.
No.
Would have never crossed my mind, but then like I looked and like thought about it and I was like, maybe.
Certainly doesn't look like current Zadorov.
I'll say this. I think the answer to that question, simply put, is no. But at the same time, I see what they're saying. I do see what they're saying.
I think the hair helps too, because they.
Yeah.
Well, he's got no scars on his face so far.
Yeah, those will come.
Zadorov has a big scar on his chin and like other places too. So, I feel like they couldn't possibly be further players from each other. Big defensemen.
Well, I don't think they were comparing them as players. No, they were comparing their faces.
I'm just saying it didn't cross my mind the same way that like Brian looks like Elias Lindholm.
All right, let's move along here to Roger. Roger says, I found a list of Bruins prospects that was published at the start of the season. It ranked the prospects, and if I exclude James Hagens from that list, it now looks like this. Dean Letourneau, Will Moore, Will Zellers, Matt Patra, Dan Zloshmelis, Cooper Simpson, Elliot Gronwald. Am I saying that right? Gronwald?
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to say Grindelwald, but that's my fantastic beast coming out there. Do you agree in general with that ranking of Bruins prospects? Do you think the Bruins will have to trade some prospects or draft picks in order to fill the holes in their defense? Thanks, love the show. I mean, what do you guys make of this list? Because it's always, prospect lists are always tough because like Patra has 70 games at the NHL level or something like that versus Will Moore, who's barely played at NCAA like one season.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
definitely changed after this year. By the way, like this list changed based off of season performances for some of these.
Of course,
guys,
yeah, like Letourneau, right, for example,
which I think is I think that's what he's asking, right?
Yeah,
Like
it is. It is, yeah. So, like, I mean, just quickly, one name that I'll say, like, the two Wills, I have Zellers ahead of Moore right now, personally.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think moving Will Moore down, in my mind, probably several slots would be one obvious change, and it's not because I'm like out on Will Moore or anything, but he had a quieter freshman season at BC than I think would be ideal. Certainly not as quiet as Dean Letourneau last year. So like we've seen this, right? It's not the end of the world that he didn't light it up as a freshman. But yeah, like I would definitely have Zellers ahead of him. I think I'd have to have Patra ahead of him. And Cooper Simpson is the one that I would move up. Now, he's only in the USHL. He's not going to North Dakota until next year, where he'll be teammates with Will Zellers. But Cooper Simpson had an awesome year in the USHL, and I have seen him like rising in other prospect rankings. So, I think he's a top 5 prospect for the Bruins at this point, and that's still counting Hagens, who still counts as a prospect, even though he signed his NHL contract. So, yeah, I guess that would be my switch, is like move Will Moore down a couple spots, move Cooper Simpson up.
Scott, what is? Oh, sorry, Bridget. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, Hagens is still a prospect. Like if Patra's on this list, then Hagens has to be on this list still. But Patra is higher on this list, obviously. Like I guess if the list is based off of ceiling, yes, like maybe Letourneau and Zellers probably have your highest ceilings. Patra right there, probably third. If you're talking about how close they are, like Patra obviously the closest. Lush Mellis closer as well. He's already in the AHL, but like I think ceiling is probably what most people are going off of. And like taking a bet on them actually reaching the potential, right? So yeah, Letourneau's up there. Hagens is probably first still. And then Patra and Zellers those would be my top 4.
What technically qualifies somebody to be still a prospect? Is it less than 200 NHL games and under the age of 23? Like what's the, like, what are the parameters? Because it gets kind of subjective.
Yeah, it's different places. But yeah, I would say like something along those lines. Like maybe, yeah, under 100 to 150 NHL games. And I think like 22, you're safely still a prospect. 23, probably borderline, depending on where you go. Yeah. 24, you're kind of not a prospect anymore.
Yeah.
So wait, if that's what you're going by, then like Minton is still on this list.
Well, like, yeah, so I guess the NHL games have to be lower, right? Because like I think of Minton as an established NHLer now.
Yeah, it's got to be a combination of.
To me, it's more like, I guess because I don't have to rank prospects for a living. Like for me, it's more just like, does this person feel like a prospect? Like it's just like a feel thing. Because like,
right.
You're right. Like if I put actual parameters on, and then it's like, well, Fraser Minton qualifies, then I'm like, well, I'm gonna change the parameters because I don't think of Fraser Minton as a prospect. Yeah. So that there's my answer. It's whatever fits to make sense in my head.
But for people that we know that are in the business of prospects and make their living on that, there are legit parameters, and oftentimes it comes down to it's a combination. Like maybe a player is a little bit older, maybe he's like 22, 23. Maybe even 24, but he's only played 10 games at the NHL level. Whereas maybe you have somebody and it's like they're a prospect, or you have somebody who's like 21, but they've played 150 games and they don't meet the games threshold to be a prospect anymore. So it's either way, it's just prospects. It does get silly because like you look at this list that Roger gives to us, and it's filled with just different types of players. I mean, you have Dean Letourneau, who's a true sophomore or going into his true junior year next year. Will Moore, but then you have Matt Poitras, who's in his 20s. Dan Zlashmelis is that he's been a pro for a couple of years. Like it's just not all prospects are created equally based on what it's. And then it comes down to what's the nature of the question. To your point, Bridget, are we talking what's their ceiling? Who's better right now? Right. So it's a slippery slope.
And like who's most likely to pan out? Like who's most likely to be a bust? Like that all has to go into it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would also say two others that weren't mentioned here, but I think Fabian Lysell and Frederic Brunet both still qualify as prospects and would be somewhere on here. Lysell has certainly slipped a bit. I don't think he needs to be in the top 5, but he's probably still in the top 10 if you're talking about the Bruins organization. And Brunet is probably just about on the same line as Grunwald in my mind. Like Brunet's further along in his development. He's played pro hockey now for a couple years. But like I can still see, I guess like I could see an NHL future for both of those defensemen.
All right, let's go to Mark. Mark says the Bruins power play has been in shambles for most part since the Olympics. I don't see much in the way of adjustments other than player changes to each unit. You guys go to practice. Are the coaches making any systematic changes or trying to? If not, why would they not be? The drop pass back and zone entries are not working.
Yeah, they've tried a few different things, and maybe part of the problem is they're not giving stuff like long enough looks, but like, they brought Patrice Bergeron out to a practice and had him working with Fraser Minton and Morgan Geekie on playing the bumper spot on the power play. And then by 2 games later, neither Geekie nor Minton were playing in the bumper on the power play. And it's like, well, it's hard for that practice with Bergeron to pay off if they're not even playing in that spot anymore. So, so there's been, I would say that more of the changes have been personnel wise, where, they've put that entire second line on the top unit, bumped Geekie and Lindholm and Elias Lindholm down to the second unit. As far as entries, like, I think we've seen some tweaks, but nothing dramatic. Like, they kind of went away from that double-barreled entry for like a game or two, and they were using the flanks a little more, and then they went back to it. And I actually think it kind of opened back up again. Like, there's clearly still work to do on their power play, but it is worth also pointing out, like, there has been some improvement. I looked up over the last 10 games, they're at 22%, which is like not lighting the world on fire, but is way better than the 11% that they were coming out of the Olympic break, like literally twice as good. So it's not like they haven't improved. It just, there are still power plays where it looks pretty ugly.
Yeah. And I think it's improved also because of, I don't know, his question was about personnel changes, but putting that second line out there more often, plus Pastrnak, has been an adjustment that is working, and I hope continues. And then obviously we'll get to see Hagens come in probably on that second unit in some capacity. So there's an obvious change that's coming there, and he's very good at entries. He's sees the ice well. He skates the puck, into the zone well. So that's coming. Haven't seen it yet with the Bruins. We saw what he did with Providence was very promising, and obviously in college he was successful on the power play. So I don't have much else to add to what Scott said. He pretty much covered it.
I would agree with that. And Bridget, you also covered it by bringing up Hagens and the second line being a unit, because that grouping has been better. There are certain power that 22% that Scott mentioned. There's certain power plays during that stretch where that second line hasn't gotten, they haven't been the dominant choice of a unit. Like they've gotten a lot of looks there, but there's been some power plays that have gone by the wayside where they didn't get a full opportunity, or maybe Marco switched things up for one power play or something. So the fact that, like, I want to say that second line McAvoy Pastrnak grouping, I feel like they have at least 3 or 4 power play goals themselves in the last, I don't know, whatever, maybe 6 games or something. So yeah, it's definitely a better look. And with Morgan Geekie starting to get hot, hopefully after the Carolina game, you maybe think, okay, does he go back on the top unit? But to your point, Bridget, maybe James Hagens is a guy on that second unit that can give Geekie a lot of looks too. Let's move along here to Liz. And Liz says, assuming the Bruins get knocked out after the first round, when do you expect?
Don't assume that, Liz. Don't be so pessimistic.
Scott, she's assuming. So we have to go with the question here. Okay? I'm going to repeat. Assuming the Bruins get knocked out after the first or second or third round of the playoffs, when do you expect Sweeney would start looking at this roster and begin making trades and or signings, UFAs, RFAs? May 5 is when the NHL draft lottery will be held. So after that, Sweeney should know when all his first round picks will be. Then the draft is in June, on June 26th. If Sweeney is making trades, most likely for a true 1C or veteran right shot defenseman, I assume it would be with the teams that didn't make the playoffs. So would there be a reason to wait until after the draft? Would he also try to start signing everyone ASAP, Zacha, Middlestat, Arvidsson, etc.? She has a second part, but I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, yeah, he could start making moves or talking trades as soon as the season's over. Every now and then there are deals that get done during that window between, like, during the playoffs by non-playoff teams, but it's not that often. Because I think teams like to I think they want like a clearer picture of how the offseason might be shaping up. So the draft lottery is part of that. Like, at the very least, I would say you're not going to see anything before then, because to Liz's point, like, you want to know which picks you have and you want to know which picks other teams have. But the other part of it is GMs usually want to get a feel of like who might actually get to free agency. So, if you're talking about like getting a right shot defenseman, it's like, okay, if there is like one specific target you want to trade for, you can try to do that. But you also might want to see, okay, who might actually get to market, who might not. So that's usually why there's a drag and things don't really get done until closer to the draft and free agency in late June, once everyone's done with the playoffs. But it's fair. Like, it's not impossible to make moves during May or early June.
My head goes to like what you can do sooner, which is extension talks. Like, right, like signing an extension with Viktor Arvidsson before free agency starts. If you want to keep Andrew Peeke, do you do that before free agency starts, or do you let him, look around and let the market set the price on him? So if they want to keep Arvidsson, extension before free agency would be the way to go, and not let him get out there in the market and maybe get a deal that he cannot turn down. So also, you want to extend Pavel Zacha, maybe. He's not at the end of his contract, but he's got a year left coming up next season. So
yeah, and I should note that too. So because Liz also mentioned Zacha and Middlestat, they're not eligible for extensions until July 1st. And technically, you're not even allowed to talk to them about extensions until then. Now, I think none of us are naive enough to think everyone truly abides by that. Like, you can probably start setting the table a bit, but that will not get done in May or June. It literally can't.
So July 1st, though, right? You said July 1st, shortly thereafter. All right. Yeah.
All right. Steven asks, former Bostonian living in Columbus, Ohio, is there any way we move Elias Lindholm this offseason? Why is he deemed untradeable? I don't dislike him, but this is a situation of getting a guy that just can't do what you thought he would do when you signed him. He's not a 1C. This is what kills the team. If we can't move him, I would go into next year with Zacha, Minton, Hagens, and move Lindholm to fourth line center. I know Corrali is signed as well, but it's time to move him to the ninth floor. Thanks. Great show. Well, I guess the obvious, why is he deemed untradeable? Because he literally has full trade protection in his contract. So he can't go anywhere unless he gives the Bruins his blessing. And I don't know if Elias Lindholm, even if the Bruins wanted to move him, is looking to pick up his family and go somewhere when he just got some stability in his professional life and personal life. I think is the simplest answer I can give.
Yeah, and the second part of that is he's also untradeable because no other team wants to take on that contract.
Mm-hmm.
He's getting $7.75 million through 2031, so
unless you eat.
Right, like he's not untradeable because the Bruins just value him so much. He's untradeable because you would have to find this perfect match of a team that actually wants him and is willing to take on most, if not all, of that contract, and that Elias Lindholm would be willing to waive his no trade clause to go to.
Yeah. Logistics are the main reason why that he doesn't come up in trade conversations because, like you said, Brian, I don't think he really wants to give up on the stability that he has when he signed that contract. Both him and Zadorov mentioned in that offseason when they signed with the Bruins, like that they could finally kind of relax and feel comfortable and set their families up. So, yeah, like on paper, no trade clause makes him untradeable. That's the main answer.
He has a full no trade until 2029.
So get that jersey while you can. All right, let's go to Tracy, who says, sending love from Canada. Tracy, the skate pod is sending you love right back. I really hope they re-sign Viktor Arvidsson. The guy's motor is second to none. Do you think 2 times 6 is reasonable, or if he wants more term? Yes, Scott?
2 years, $6 million.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Do you think 2 years at $6 million is reasonable, or if he wants more term at 3 times 5, does that get it done? So Viktor Arvidsson being re-signed is something that a lot of Bruins fans have been talking about for really, I would say heavily, maybe since the start of 2026 calendar year. I think his play has been fantastic. I think we all acknowledge that. Should they re-sign him? And if so, what should be the goal contract?
I mean, I would definitely be talking, and I think they have been talking. I actually thought from things I was hearing that like there was a chance that was going to get done pretty soon after the deadline, but I think it dragged a little bit, and then I think they just kind of decided to table it until after the year, then, kind of letting it potentially interfere with anything happening down the stretch. Yeah, I mean, if it makes sense, but like what makes sense? Like I like those numbers that Tracy mentions. If I could get Viktor Arvidsson for 2 years, $6 million a year, sign me up all day. 3 years, $5 million a year, I'm in. But what if he goes to the open market? He might get more than that. So like how far beyond, or how much more than that are you willing to extend yourself? Like, would you go 2 years, $7 million a year, or would you go 3 years, $6 million a year? Like, what if it bumps up $1 million a year from those numbers? Or what if, okay, I'll take a yearly discount at 5 or 5.5, but I want it to be a 4-year deal, right? Like, so this is where it kind of starts to get uncomfortable. And if you're the Bruins, you have to ask yourself just how far you're willing to extend. So I think the fact that it didn't happen right away around the deadline would suggest that, there probably is a gap there that will need to be bridged after the season when they reconvene. But I'm willing to extend myself a little bit to keep him because he's been such a good fit, but I'm not going crazy because he is 32.
He actually just turned 33 2 days ago.
Oh, happy birthday.
So, yeah, happy belated birthday. But yeah, so he's 33 now. And just to, remind people of the contract that he's currently on, it's 2 years, $4 million a year contract, cap hit that he's got. So, that obviously he's going to go up from that. And so you can kind of see how much he's going up from that. If it's over 6 a year, that's a pretty decent pay increase. We know Marco Sturm is very high on him, so there'll probably be some influence there. And obviously the season that he's had kind of speaks for itself, the numbers. So the fit, the production, how much he's well liked by the team and the coaching staff, like that all could go a long way to maybe convincing Don Sweeney that he's worth that that bump in pay. Maybe he decides I actually want to go get my payday somewhere else, but something tells me he just really likes it here too. So does he take a little bit off the price to stay here? Maybe.
Bridget, that's a good point you mentioned, and I honestly, I think a team is going to have to significantly offer Arvidsson far more than what the Bruins would be willing to do, because I think if it's anything close, if we're talking $500,000-$600,000 grand more of a AAV, I think for Arvidsson it's probably worth it to stay in Boston, because he probably likes the area, he probably likes the fit. Parents always love this area because of the schools and the education, the hospitals, all that stuff. Like those things do matter for family. These guys are hockey players by trade, yes, but they're also parents, right? Most of them. So that stuff does matter. So if somebody offers Arvidsson an additional $1.5 million per year, okay, you got my attention. But if it's anything less than that, I don't know if he would chomp at that if it was, somewhere else around the league. The other thing too is that the cap is going up as well. That's the great equalizer. So when you're talking about percentage against the cap, what does that look like next year? If it's Scott, do you have something you want to say? I can tell by your face. There's something.
No. Finish your point.
Okay, but
his face was saying, "I want to drink this coffee."
Yeah, I think that was the bigger issue.
I been doing this podcast for long enough. I can tell on each of you when your faces look like you have something you want to say.
If I go 4 minutes without drinking coffee, I just get really anxious about it.
Okay.
You might have a problem.
All right. Well, with that said, this next question.
Well, hold on. I did have a thought.
See, Bridget, I told you. I could see.
No, but it was a thought on Arvidsson, but it could wait until you were done with your point. Got it. Did you guys see the Bruins post on social media? Like one of those question prompts that, they do like every week or two. And it was, which teammate would you trust as a babysitter? And Viktor Arvidsson was a pretty popular answer. He was, wow. He got several responses. And then I saw Zacha was one, which says a lot because I don't think Zacha has any kids yet. I believe he has. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but I think he has one on the way. Korpisalo. Oh, Swayman. It was Swayman and Jokiharju were together, and they're like mulling it over. And Jokiharju's like, "What about Zadorov?" And Swayman's like, "Yeah." And Jokiharju's like, "Well, he has the most kids." And then Swayman's just like, "I'll go with Corpy."
That's funny.
See, it could be insulting.
Arvidsson's another one of those guys. We'll go back a couple of questions. We were talking about the leadership. He's definitely probably in that group too, probably on the quieter side, more in that Zacha camp. But this next question, guys, actually, I think is really fun for a lot of reasons. So we're going to go over to YouTube where Wheel6243, Wheels Up, says, where would this team be and what would it look like if Marchand was still here? And the first thing that I think of, guys, is if Marchand was never traded, what's the impact it has on the Bruins last year in the standings, where, oh, by the way,
no Hagens.
They finished with this. There goes Bridget again, just burying the lead. I'm getting there. But you look at the standings, and the Bruins and the Kraken both finished with 76 points last year. Buffalo 79, Anaheim 80. So yes, to Bridget's point, where do the Bruins finish in the standings? Do they ever draft James Hagens if Marchand was never traded? And I have to say, I think no, probably not.
What I said was also the opposite of burying the lead, by the way. I got there. Sooner. You wouldn't have Hagens.
Jumping the gun. How's jumping the gun? Does that work?
Jumping the gun is better. You wouldn't have Hagens, but maybe you have Roger McQueen at like 10,
Yeah.
And he's going to be a good player. He had a great season at Providence was Rookie of the Year in Hockey East. His back doesn't seem to be bothering him. Like, he would have, like, you could have still gotten a good pick, is what I'm saying. Like, maybe you would have been drafting in that 10 to 15 range. And
maybe you would have gotten Ben Kindle, who has turned out to be quite the find for Pittsburgh. They got him at 11. But what you could do for this question, just to, because you're right, like the Hagens part of it is kind of the obvious place to start if you don't trade Marchand. But what if we do it this way? Like, you did still trade Marchand, goes down to Florida, wins his cup, but the Panthers don't figure out a way to re-sign him. He gets to free agency, and he comes back to Boston in the summer, and now he's back part of this group. Like, what if we go that way? Because I in a way, I almost think that's more interesting. Of like, what would this group be like? In theory, you're a better team with Brad Marchand.
Oh yeah,
like duh. But I also I do think there was an element of it hurt at the time, but I think this team and this organization needed that rip off the Band-Aid moment, and McAvoy and Pastrnak kind of needed that push into this is your team now, take it and run with it. And if Marchand's still here, whether that's because you didn't trade him or because you re-signed him this summer, then you still haven't really had that moment. And I wonder, I don't know, I just wonder if we'd be going through another year right now where they feel stuck in quicksand, and you still feel like that ripping off the Band-Aid is still coming. You still feel like you still have to do that at some point, I do think in the long term, it's probably a good thing for the organization that they got that out of the way, and they're on sort of the bounce back now.
I mean, and Scott, what you're saying was, if they did trade him and he came back, meaning Hagens would still be here, meaning they would still have finished where they finished. Yeah. So that wouldn't have changed. So they still have Hagens in the system, but my thoughts are that obviously it makes your team better, and I think I would give them higher hopes in the playoffs if he was on the team this year. He's somebody that has been really good for them in the past in the playoffs. He is a leader. We're not having the conversation about who's the next, or we're probably having a conversation about who's the next captain after him because of his age, but we're not saying, oh, should it be Pasta or Mac? We're not going through the same kind of conversations as this year, which without a captain at all being named. I don't know. Does this question mean where would he be in the lineup?
Well, it's also, I mean,
I'm not as interested in that.
No, I think I look at the roster construction. Okay, so if the Bruins didn't trade him last year, or no, if they did trade him, but then he came back in the offseason, okay, so then how does that impact their offseason plans? They probably don't trade for Viktor Arvidsson, which if you told me this time last year, I would say, okay, I'd rather Marchand over Arvidsson. But hindsight's 2020, and as great as Marchand is, for whatever reason, Zacha, Middlestad, and Arvidsson have been magic and one of the best lines in hockey this year. So you don't have that dynamic. Now, granted, you have Marchand, so he probably clicks with somebody else, right? But I'm just saying, there is a bit of a butterfly effect here with the current roster construction we're seeing. It wouldn't be this exact roster with Brad Marchand. There would be a little bit of give somewhere else. So that's worth mentioning too. And it's probably Arvidsson. It probably starts with Arvidsson.
Yeah, and I just think the one thing I just wonder about is so much of this team's success this year has just been how well this group has come together. And I think that happened in part because the leaders were really forced to reset the culture.
Yeah. And
forced to try to bring together a team that at the end of last year kind of looked like a bunch of misfits. And I just wonder if that happens if Marchand's still here. Marchand was a good captain. He was a great leader for this team for a long time. I'm not taking anything away from that, but he could also be a guy who's a little bit stuck in his ways at times. And I just think the organization needed a new way. And I don't know if that happens if Marchand's still here wearing the C.
And in Florida, he was just part of their group. right?
Yeah.
He wasn't the leader. He was one of, I mean, that whole team had been to back-to-back finals at that point. They're all leaders in their own right, but he was just a guy with them in terms of leadership, but not the guy. And yeah, I do think there's an element of a new chapter. So for both parties, but fun question. All right, we'll get to a couple of quick ones to finish off here. Alex on YouTube says, what player should the Bruins be interested in drafting with the Toronto pick? I'll just say the best one, the best player available. We haven't really done much because the Bruins are obviously a playoff hopeful team. We haven't really spent much time on prospects in the draft as much as we did this time last year, where I think the three of us were very well versed in everybody. But yeah.
Yeah, I will say, like, but I think that's a good point to make and a good place to start, because I think a lot of people are doing the thing where it's like, well, they don't have any right shot defensemen on the way, so they should draft a right shot defenseman. And this is a good draft for right shot defenseman, so that might work out that way naturally. But if you think there's a center or a wing or a left shot defenseman on the board that's better than any right shot defenseman left, you just take the best player. If we're talking, especially if we're talking about, again, if it's that Toronto pick, it's in the top 10, most likely. Like, you don't draft for need there. You draft the best player available. If it lines up that it happens to be a right shot defenseman, cool. But you're telling me, like, they couldn't use a top pairing left shot guy? Like, your whole left side's, well, most of your left side's getting a bit older in Zadorov and Hampus Lindholm. You could use that. You could never really have too many centers, especially if you draft one this year and either that guy eventually moves to the wing or Hagens maybe sticks on the wing. Like, you're not turning down a center. You're certainly not at that spot yet as a franchise. And, like, they could use another scoring wing to work in somewhere along the way. So yeah, you just take the best player. Bridge, I don't know if you have any thoughts before maybe I just list off a few names I like.
Yeah, go ahead. You get to it. I was going to say they're probably drafting in the 6 to 10 range, so that's where you're looking. If people are wanting to do their own, like, scouting and research and, like, look at the names in that range, because if they get it, that's where it will be. Currently, I think they're 7th, right? I mean, obviously the draft changes at the lottery. And if, just to reiterate, Bruins will not get the pick if it's in the 1 through 5 range. It will be, but Toronto's not going to be good enough to get out of the 6 to 7 or 6 to 10 range. So that's where you should be looking in different rankings.
Yeah. So if we're looking at right shot D, I like Daxon Rudolph a lot. Pretty good size. I think he's 6'2". Offensive skill, can contribute that way. I think he's got a pretty well-rounded game. On the left side, I feel the same way about Carson Carrolls, who also has a little bit of nastiness in his game. I see him and Albert Smits together a lot in rankings, and I do like Smits as well, but I like Carrolls more. I just think he has kind of a more polished game at both ends of the ice. Centers, Caleb Malhotra, who seems to be climbing and can now be a top 5 guy. But if he doesn't go top 5, I really like Caleb Malhotra, son of Manny Malhotra. More offensive skill than Manny. Caleb's heading to BU next year, where he'll be teammates with Tynan Lawrence, the other top center in this draft, who got off to a really quiet start at BU, but I think finished the year pretty well, or actually really well. I think in the playoffs, he was probably BU's best player for whatever that says, because BU wasn't very successful in the playoffs, but he was, like, borderline putting the team on his back at the very end, which was really encouraging to see. I think you saw him start to find his game. Who else? I like Vigo Bjork. I don't know if the Bruins go with another smaller forward. You know, he's 5'9", 5'10", can play center or wing. My guess is maybe they don't go with that type of player, but I just really like his game. He's just, like, super competitive and very skilled. But yeah, I'll throw those names out.
Verhoff's probably not around at that range, we think. So
yeah, or Chase Reed, who I really like, but I think he's going top 5.
Yeah, but you never know, right?
Yeah.
You just never know. Hagens was top 3 until, he wasn't, which was like weeks before the draft. And then
Brady
Martin shot up.
I feel like some of our very last projections was like, we hope the Bruins draft 5th because then they can get Hagens, but we weren't thinking 7 was going to be a place if you get him. And then things changed at the very late stages of, once we started hearing like actual reports from insiders about like, actually this team is really interested in this specific person. That's when we started to realize he might fall a little bit further. But yeah.
If history tells us anything, whatever the specific final mock draft order you see from all the top sites out there, I don't know if it ever ends up being that exact way. I mean, there's always teams at the last second, they have their interviews with players, they get to know their personalities, they really like this player. They teams do kind of start to look at, I think, needs as well sometimes. I know we say draft best player available, but if you look at last draft, I think there was some teams that drafted based on, well, honestly, it's kind of what Scott just said. Scott mentioned a smaller forward or a smaller player that he was like, I don't know if the Bruins would go for it. And why is that? Because they just maybe brought in Hagens, who's a bit of a smaller guy. Like, so there are things like that. Like, okay, we got this last year, let's go for this year. So it's tough to predict. But let's go to one final question here before we finish off here. Dylan says, why does media all around the league say the Bruins are way overperforming expectations and are just kind of lucky, even though they have generally been keeping this pace the whole season? I get their expected goals are much lower than their actual goals, and they get bailed out by goaltending, but at a certain point, aren't they, they are what they are. What their record says, essentially. So what do you guys make of this narrative around the Bruins that they're just kind of fool's gold and maybe kind of, I guess, maybe frauds or pretenders? I guess there's some words that people would characterize a team like this Bruins team.
Yeah, which I get, because they are, in all situations, they are 27th in the NHL in expected goals for percentage. That is generally not the mark of a good team. It indicates that they get outchanced. They give up more high danger chances than they get, which I think is true. I don't think those numbers lie. Like, I think that's accurate. But there is something to, so there's a stat called PDO, which is just, it's shooting percentage plus save percentage. 100% is a 100 PDO is average. And if you think about that, that makes sense, right? Because the league average save percentage plus league average shooting percentage is going to add up to 100. So the idea is, like, if you're over 100, maybe you're a little lucky because those two things can sometimes be more luck. And if you're way under, maybe you've been unlucky. The Bruins are 5th in PDO at 1.018. But if you look around them, it's like, it's all good. It's all good teams, not what I would call lucky teams. Like, number 1 is Dallas, 2 is Buffalo, 3 Tampa, 4 Montreal, 5 Bruins, 6 Colorado, 7 Minnesota, 8 Pittsburgh. It's like, these are just good teams. And I do think if we're looking at that formula, it's like, well, the save percentage part of it, we understand why the Bruins rate highly in that, because they have one of the best goalies in the NHL. Even if Jeremy Swayman has slipped up a little bit recently on the season, he has clearly been one of the, at worst, top 4 goalies in the NHL this season. So it's like, well, that's pretty sustainable if Swayman's on his game. So then you look at the shooting percentage part of it, and it's like, well, Pasternak has a really good shot. Morgan Geekie has a really good shot. He wasn't going to stay at 30%. And like, I think that's where people get into the luck portion of it, is like earlier on this season when Geekie just had this ridiculously high shooting percentage. It was like, well, that's not going to continue. And sure enough, it didn't. Geekie hit his cold patches. But I think probably what no one saw coming was all of a sudden Pavel Zacha scoring on 40% of his shots post-Olympics. So it's like you just traded one super hot shooter for another, which you can't really predict. And in fairness, is probably not really sustainable. Like, unless you believe Pavel Zacha is also just one of the best finishers in the NHL, which his entire career would tell us is probably not the case. So that's where I think some luck, where the Bruins would still be due for some regression, is like, okay, you've got Pastrnak. Are you always going to have someone who's just finishing at an absurd rate? Or do you need something more than that? And like, chances are you probably need more than that. It's worked for them this year to just ride one hot shooting streak after another. But that would be the part that is not the most sustainable if you're going forward, or if you're relying on that to be part of your formula for playoff success.
Bridget, any thoughts there?
No, not really. I mean, he had to pull out the advanced stats for this one, which is not surprising. I was like trying to follow along with PDO, which I've never heard you talk about before. So I don't know if that's ever been mentioned on this podcast before.
Oh, I've definitely mentioned it at some point. Not often, but.
Well, listen, I mean, I guess my only thought is, at the end of the day, what matters to me, what should matter to the Bruins, is qualifying for the postseason and showing yourselves well and try to build positive momentum for the future. You know, have players around the league look at what you have going on and think that'd be a cool place to play if I have the opportunity to go there. You know, start to build what we kind of saw the Bruins build in the mid-late 2000s as they approached, you know, their 2011 championship. It's not going to be overnight, but are they a little bit lucky by terms of advanced analytics to be where they are this year? Sure. But you know what? To the question that was asked, at this point, they are what their record says they are, which is 99% a playoff team. And if they can turn that playoff experience into something to build towards for the future, then who cares what all the advanced stats say, right? Like, as long as they're in the dance, then you know, it's a year that people weren't expecting. So it's positive energy for the team, positive momentum. You're bringing a kid like Hagens to get good experience as well. So advanced stats, they're great, but at the end of the day, if you make the playoffs, then whatever. Like, they might not go very far this year, but again, you build that positivity for the organization going forward. Maybe they'll be better on paper. But we also saw the Bruins in 2022, 23. They were probably advanced analytics darlings, and they had the best record of all time, and they were bouncing around one. So hockey is played by humans and not advanced stats, as we all know. But they're good to cite.
But that Florida team was a little bit of an analytics star. Like, they had much better underlying metrics than the Bruins do this year.
Oh yeah, I'm not comparing. I'm not saying that this Bruins team's going to win. I'm just saying, like, there are Bruins teams of years past that have had great metrics and then not great. And you know, sometimes they all end in the same way. So what is it? You know. But.
Yeah, I would just say, like, my last point here would just be next season. Like, if you want to make this sustainable going forward and build on it and get better, the structure does have to improve. Like, they are 46.4% expected goals on the season, which, like, the teams around them are Winnipeg, St. Louis, Rangers, Islanders, who are very goalie dependent, Calgary, San Jose, Vancouver, Seattle. Like, this is not the neighborhood of Stanley Cup contenders. You do at some point need to start outpossessing and outchancing your opponents to have a sustainable formula. It is very hard to be successful consistently if your formula is, we're just going to rely on a great goalie and a high shooting percentage. Like, that is tough to do.
That shouldn't be their goal, their formula. The only point that's being made in terms of this current team right now is, you know, the 07-08 Bruins were the ultimate, you know, bend don't break team. They probably were hemmed in a lot, but coming on the heels of a couple of down seasons, just like this Bruins coming on the heels of last year being a down season, you don't always go from, you know, a lottery team to what you're talking about overnight. You have to have that intermediate season where you're kind of doing what they're doing now. So the goal is, they're hanging on by a thread right now. But to your point, Scott, going forward, yes, you have to rectify these things to not always be that team. I just think that it happens in phases. And I think that I'm just not surprised by looking at a team with a new coach and a new system with a lot of new players. And you're right in what you're saying. I'm just saying what we're currently seeing is kind of par for the course for a team that's like trying to build. So that's the next step, is what you're saying, 1,000%.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you all very much for the questions. We hope that James Hagens makes his debut on Saturday so we can come back on Monday and discuss a couple of games there. Before we sign out, any final questions or comments from the two of you?
I don't think so. I think I'm good. Well, the one thing I'll note is there's a double header at the Garden on Saturday. So Bruins are at 12:30, and then 7:00 is the Boston Fleet hosting Montreal, and PWHL game that's sold out. It'll be one of the biggest crowds ever for a women's hockey game in the United States. So I'm going to hang around for that. I'm just spending all day at the Garden, and I'm really looking forward to that game too.
All right, Bridget, I hope your knee feels better. Hope you ice it. If you need anything, we're a text away. And
Scott's gonna have to like help me get around. No, I think I should be. I don't think I'm walking there today though. We walked there yesterday. Don't think that's happening. Probably gonna have to try.
You don't want to run across Leo Birmingham Way traffic with a bad knee.
No, we did that yesterday. But we'll just need some Advil.
The crosswalk sign that's been set up for months and has not been turned on.
No, and yesterday when
great job, Boston. Way to go.
All the lights were blinking, by the way. It was like a blinking red and a blinking yellow the other way, and it was just like there was no time. We literally just had to pick a time to run across, but I don't think I'm doing that today, so maybe we drive. But yeah, hopefully no more injuries today.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for listening. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk to you on Monday. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.